All right. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about a topic that can be pretty important to a lot of grad students, but also to people in other areas of school and profession as well. And that is the power balance and navigating professional boundaries for grad students. So we're going to be covering a couple different things today. First, we're going to talk about kind of what the power differentials are and what those might look like. We're going to talk about how those power differentials might affect mental health concerns as well as our academic performance. How can we start to take care of ourselves and talk about boundaries? And also, how can we start to organize, get together, and maybe push for some change within grad programs or within other institutions where those power differentials are really prevalent? So it's really important to first kind of label the issue here. And that is that there is a really inherent power differential between the mentor or the supervisor and the graduate student. This power differential places the supervisor or the mentor in a position of power over the graduate student. And that's because the supervisor or the mentor is ultimately the one in charge of your evaluation, in charge of your grades, in charge of any rewards or punishments, stipends, financial assistance, authorship on presentations or papers, career development, and ultimately your ability to graduate on time or in good standing from the program. And these power differentials can also really be magnified by various different identity factors, such as race and ethnicity, age, gender, ability status, and so much more. Programs and universities may try to counteract some of these inherent power differentials by giving the students a perception of power through university or program policies that are often found within our program handbooks. However, research in looking at that and those studies has shown that many students are actually pretty hesitant to use or refer to those policies out of worry for longstanding or worry for like the potential impact for longstanding supervisory relationships, worry for the potential of administrative pushback or retaliation, or history of power abuses that make using those policies really difficult. So the result of that dynamic ultimately becomes this kind of pattern of continued disempowerment and disenfranchisement for graduate students. And that can lead to further potential for abuses of power, creating this kind of vicious cycle. And so when we're looking at this power imbalance and the potential abuse of power towards graduate students, we can see that there can be some pretty dramatic impacts on their lives, both in and outside of their program. Studies have indicated that up to 50% of graduate students report increased symptoms of depression. 68% may be reporting increased symptoms of anxiety. And 28% of graduate students report high levels of burnout, with even more reporting low to moderate levels of burnout. And when we take a look at that, up to 91% of graduate students who were surveyed in those studies were found to report overall decreased levels of engagement in their work. And so that's a pretty big number. It's pretty staggering. And that can lead to decreased academic performance and decreased passion for their work or for the subject as a whole. So all these factors can further fuel that cycle of disenfranchisement and power imbalances within graduate school. So how can we start to take care of ourselves, knowing that these things exist and that these things can really impact us? How do we take care of ourselves as grad students? And the first step is to start putting those healthy boundaries in place. Because of those power imbalances inherent in graduate school, it can often be really difficult to feel like we're able to say no to our mentors or to our advisors. And the first step to taking back some semblance of power and agency within our education is learning how and when we can say no. If we ultimately overburden ourselves with different responsibilities, different tasks, papers, presentations, research studies, so on and so forth, it actually takes away time from other projects that we need to be prioritizing. So while saying no can feel like we're letting people down, saying no is actually showing that we're really prioritizing the commitments and projects that we've already signed up for. Other things that we can do to physically take care of ourselves include things like making sure that we're getting enough sleep, eating an adequate nutritious diet, as well as staying active when we can. The mind and the body are ultimately linked. So if we're going to be taking care of our bodies, we'll ultimately start taking care of our minds as well. Some other things we can do, whoops. Sorry about that. Some other things that we can do to kind of defend against burnout include being really deliberate with how we're scheduling times for our hobbies and being really deliberate with making sure that we're scheduling the times for the things that we enjoy, prioritizing social time with our friends and our family, and incorporating self-care into our daily routine. We can't find dedicated self-care time during our, during our daily schedules. And last, we really want to make sure that we're practicing self-compassion. Sometimes it can feel like we really need to do everything as a graduate student, and that's just not possible and not feasible. We need to be able to be kind to ourselves and to give ourselves grace when we need it so that we don't become our own worst enemies and so we don't start to approach those really high levels of burnout.
So Dan already alluded to boundaries, but I want to talk about boundaries a little bit more. Because creating and maintaining healthy boundaries is going to be the best way for you to ensure your own success and well-being in graduate school. Boundaries are really key here because they're a way for us to set limits within the power differential of graduate school. One way to set boundaries is by creating a schedule, which Dan already mentioned, and making sure that we're really sticking to the schedule that we create. This can look like setting times throughout the day where you devote to work activities and then setting other times of the day where you devote to out of work activities. And this can look like setting limits on when we're checking and responding to emails. With emails being on our phone, it's so easy to be just like mindlessly checking. And it's so easy to do that. But creating that boundary for yourself, being like, okay, I'm not going to check my email between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. So I'm creating that boundary of being like, between those hours, that is for me and not work. Another boundary that you can create is through asserting yourself and asking for what you need. If you're given an assignment or placed onto a project, you're allowed to ask what is expected of you and how to navigate your own needs within that situation. And then also, just like with the scheduling, making sure that you are sticking to your plan of asserting your needs within an assignment. Know your limitations, and that saying no is difficult, but it is necessary in creating boundaries, just like what Dan was alluding to. Saying no and not overburdening ourselves is ultimately going to be what allows us to maintain our boundaries and prioritize our own time and ourselves. And once you set these boundaries, it can be useful to communicate those boundaries to those around you. This also places some responsibility on other people to act within your boundaries as a graduate student. And it's a way that we as graduate students can begin to take back some of our power within that power differential. One thing that a mentor told me when I was early on in my graduate career was, they said, imagine all your goals in 5 years. What do you want to obtain in 5 years? And say yes to every opportunity that comes your way that gets you to your goals within 5 years, and say no to every opportunity that comes your way that doesn't get you to your 5-year goal mark. Because when you're an early professional, when you're in grad school, there's so much pressure to say yes to everything. And that can quickly get you in a spot where you can be very overwhelmed and your boundaries are blurred. So really getting in touch with your values, your needs, your wants, especially like to have in mind for a 5-year goal, is really essential. So as a grad student and being in these systems and knowing that there's this power differential going on, it can feel kind of demoralizing and defeating. It's like, okay, what do I do? I'm just one individual in this whole program, but change is possible. And while it's important to recognize that boundaries and self-care are really important, the issue of power imbalances is a systemic one, excuse me. And graduate students together can have the power to enact system level change. So really pulling on your community, pulling on each other is how, and organizing together is how change can be made. It can be helpful to meet with other graduate students, petition your program, write a formal letter to the program director or dean. If folks feel uncomfortable or unsafe doing this type of work, that's okay. They can reach out to different organizations or offices on campus. There's the WSU Graduate and Professional Student Association, or the WSU Ombuds Office. The GPSA is an on-campus organization for graduate students that serves as a graduate student union and will help to advocate with and for graduate students. There's also the WSU Ombuds Office, which serves to protect the interests, rights, and privileges of students in the university. And they can also serve to advocate for graduate students and provide guidance on the best ways to navigate any difficulties or issues that come up in your program, and making sure that your needs are getting met. I'll go ahead and put in a little bit, put those two links to those two offices in the chat, but we can move on. Great. So I know I'm assuming that everyone here on the call is a graduate student, and I know your schedules are jam-packed and there is not much more for other stuff. I think it's great that you're just coming to this talk today so you can get a little bit of validation and support, I think. But if you do have some extra time, I wanted you to have some resources that you could look into. The first one is an article released by APA, American Psychological Association, on specifically this issue, navigating the power differential that grad students face. It's a very quick read. You probably can read it 5-10 minutes. I really recommend it. Gives good examples of other graduate students going through some issues in graduate school and how they navigated that process. And we mentioned boundaries a lot throughout this presentation. And if you enjoy TED Talks, there's a really great TED Talk called Building a Better Life with Boundaries. And so it's like, oh, I need a break from reading. I've read so much, I don't want to read that article. Watch this 10-minute TED Talk video on how you can implement boundaries in your life. And lastly, now this is a lot to ask, but it is a book that if you're really interested in, like, okay, how can I create boundaries in my life in a social justice lens? The book by Kristen Storm, Empowered Boundaries, Speaking Truth, Setting Boundaries, Inspiring Social Change, is a great book that y'all could read if you're looking at how to implement boundaries, how to organize, and how to create some social change for your community. And like we mentioned earlier with, the two offices that, really advocate for grad students, sometimes it's nice to talk about your feelings, what you're going through with a mental health professional or in a group setting. So if y'all call this 509-335-4511 number, that's the CAPS reception desk office, and you can schedule initial consultation. And after you get initial consultation completed, you can kind of inquire about these group therapy and workshops that we offer, as well as individual counseling. We have a specific grad student group, Understanding Self and Others, and it's just for grad students. We also have some really great workshops such as Getting Unstuck, Mood Management, Mindfulness, and these are all great workshops that provide skills on how to kind of navigate life so that you're not feeling so distressed all the time. And with that, that's the end of our presentation. We can go ahead and stop recording, please.